welcome to Careers and Coffee. I'm Lucy, and I am joined by my wonderful co-host Charlotte Picker. Hi, Charlotte.
Hi.
Um, so each week, Charlotte and I always have a virtual coffee, and our conversations always turn into career conversations. So we thought over the next 6 weeks, we'll invite you along so you can listen into our conversation, join into the conversation as well. So, Charlotte, do you have your coffee? I've just seen you there drinking your
I
coffee.
do. I always have my coffee.
Brilliant. So, Charlotte, what topic are we going to be talking about today?
So today we're going to be talking about CVs and cover letters because we couldn't really talk about CVs without cover letters. The two kind of go together. There's lots of discussion about both. We're going to cover things like format of CV, customization, what to have on it, what not to have on it. Do you write a cover letter? Don't you write a cover letter? There's a whole plethora of things we're going to cover today.
Oh, absolutely love that. So, Charlotte, the first question I have
Mm-hmm.
is, do you tailor your CV for each job application?
No. Uh, and so I actually did a poll for this very reason because I wanted to understand whether other people did. So I'll just share with you all the results of the poll. I'd be really interested. So please do comment and let us know your thoughts. But essentially, I asked the question, do you customize your CV for each job you apply for? So 30% of those that replied said that absolutely they customize. Only 22% are in my camp and said no. And then 48% said sometimes it depends. We would love to know what it depends on. Why sometimes, why not? I think for me personally, why I don't customize my CV is, and for anybody who follows me will know that I've recently published an article on LinkedIn around being a generalist. Because I'm a generalist, I've got a lot of breadth on my CV. And so if I was to customize it for each individual job that I was applying for, it would lack depth across each of the things I've done because I've done so many different things. And that's why I have one stock CV. And then the thing I customize, and we'll come on to it later, is cover letters. And that for me is the thing that's about the tailoring. What about you, Lucy? What do you do?
I am in the camp of depends
Ah,
because initially when you and I talked about it, I was like, yeah, I definitely would tailor my CV for every job application. But when I went off and reflected about it, and then when you did your poll, I actually thought it would really depend because those that know me know that I've worked in service management for a long time. And if I was applying for a service transition role or a service design role or a service delivery role, my CV would kind of, if I do say so myself, would kind of fit the bill for that. But if I was applying for something that was a little bit different to my experience, I would definitely tailor my CV to having a look at the job spec. And interestingly, Charlotte sent me a link to a company via a company called Till, and I watched their YouTube video, which I'll make sure is in the comments. And they were showing how you can have a look at a job spec and then tailoring that job spec to your CV. So it was about having maybe like a one of the duties in the job description, and then you're asking yourself, have I done that before? And if it's yes, I have done it before and I did it in this role and this was the outcome and the result, tailoring that into a bullet point into the jobs that you've done, which I found really interesting and also quite nice because I do something similar. So I felt like I was on the right path.
see, I find that really interesting because that's how I approach writing a cover letter,
Mm,
which is looking at what's in the job spec, and then that's where I sort of like laser focus on being able to demonstrate those specific things.
yeah.
For me, your CV is your resume for anybody in America, is your value proposition, and so it should give a good breadth of detail around everything you've done, because for me it shows you as a well-rounded person. Whereas
Mm.
I think a cover letter is the thing that it allows you to tailor and to be able to specifically, be really enthusiastic about the business you're applying for, show that you've researched it, but also be able to say, hey, to your point and to what Teal says, is I've done this and I've done this by doing this, this, and this.
Yeah.
Now, what I've noticed more and more is that cover letters are actually becoming more optional, whereas years ago they were a bit more mandatory.
Yeah.
And I shared with Lucy yesterday, and I'm going to share with everybody today, a lady called Anne Duso was running a poll on whether, if somebody says that their cover letter is optional, whether you do it or not. And interestingly, when I took the snapshot last night, 35% of people say if a cover letter is optional, they will submit a cover letter, but 64% say they don't. So they must, maybe I'm guessing here, but they must be customizing their CV. What do you think, Lucy?
Yeah, maybe. I do find that really interesting because I definitely am now on the side of submitting a cover letter since the pandemic. And
Why is that?
I think that nowadays there's a little bit more, I personally feel that there's probably a little bit more kind of competition out there. I say competition. I don't know. A really good question. I think maybe I need to go and reflect on that because I guess I never really thought about it. I just do it more. I think it is because of that actually, because there's more, when you apply for a role, especially if
Mm-hmm.
you see it on the LinkedIn, you're like, 1 million people have already applied for this job. And I feel like I want to stand out. It's not a million, I'm over exaggerating. But I think
Well,
I just want to make myself stand out a little bit more, especially with now been freelancing the last kind of 6 months. I've wanted to kind of include a cover letter when I've applied to kind of share a little bit of my experience that maybe my CV doesn't highlight enough.
yeah.
Or if I'm looking to do something a little bit different, I've also been exploring that as well. I've also kind of put a cover letter together to explain my reasons behind kind of that journey as well.
Just on the 1 million people applying for a job thing, because I know that puts a lot of people off when they see like hundreds of people have applied for a job. I recently learned that if you click on the apply button within LinkedIn, even if you get to the application and you don't fill it in, it still logs you as somebody that's applied, and you might not have applied at all.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I thought that was
Inside
quite,
scoop.
yeah, well, I can't
Mm.
remember where I found that out, but actually probably on LinkedIn. But yeah, no, so I thought that's very interesting because it is intimidating when you see like over 300 people have applied for this job and you think, I haven't got a cat in hell's chance.
Yeah, no.
But what I was going to say, going back to the cover letter piece, is for me, when I've been a hiring manager, I like to get a cover letter because it tells you something more, and it tells you, that the person's actually very interested in the company and the role. I once put somebody through to a round of interviews who actually I then later went on to hire based on the strength of their cover letter because their CV wasn't very good.
Mm.
So I'm a big fan of the cover letter, and so much so, going back to the poll that Anne has done, I am definitely in that 35% of people who, if it's optional, I do. But if there's no option to add a cover letter, quite often, I will add an extra page into my CV so it's got a cover letter in.
Yeah.
Because I think it makes it stronger.
I'm definitely on that side now as well with exactly what you've just said there. So Charlotte, another thing that I thought we could talk about today as well when it comes to CVs
Yeah.
is let's have a look at format. What should we include? What shouldn't we include? So what's
Yeah.
your view on format?
So the format of my CV has definitely changed tenfold over the years. I'm a big fan of using Canva. There are obviously other tools out there. And I like it because it's not just a page of white with text.
Yeah.
And I've actually had loads of, this sounds a bit arrogant, but I've had loads of compliments from people, from recruiters, from hiring managers, from talent acquisition people about the format of my CV. It feels more personal because I've made it into, as I said, the value proposition. I'm not against a plain white and black text CV. That's fine too. But I think if you want to stand out, I've also seen like other people who have customized their CV for particular companies, and they've turned it into something that's got like company branding. And
Yeah.
using something like Canva is a great way to do that. I mean, I think you probably can also do it through even just using Google Docs, or
Yeah.
to be able to put in some of that imagery. But that personally is my preference. The other thing in terms of things to have on there, people now, still now, put on their date of birth on a CV. First of all, it is illegal for anybody, any hiring business, to ask anybody their date of birth. So you absolutely don't need that on your CV. I've also seen somebody who's put their national insurance number on there once, which I found quite odd. Again, that's personally identifiable information.
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely wouldn't have that on there. Marital status, again, that's irrelevant. That doesn't need to be on your CV. Your CV, I come back to this, is your value proposition. It's about your experience and who you are as a well-rounded person. It's really important that you've got your work experience on there, but also other things in your life. So like I have things around the volunteering that I do, some awards that I won, and yeah, and then also I include sample references that I've got from recommendations from LinkedIn. What about you, Lucy? What's your format? What things do you think people should include, not include?
Yeah, a couple of things you said there that I do and don't do. I actually like that you said about kind of using a different format, and something that I read, and this was like when I first kind of started out in my career. I read a story about somebody who went for a graphic design role at Innocent Smoothie, and they created their CV because it's graphic design and they
Yeah.
had all the tools and the techniques. They made like a bottle, and then like around on the bottle, all the labels was all of their experience and their
That's
CV,
incredible. I love
which
that
I thought was pretty
creativity.
cool. So what I will say to that is if you are a creative and you do something like that, do not be afraid to think outside the box and do something like that, because I think that will make you 100% stand out. My format is currently in Word, so it's very black and white. Um, I have very basic information at the top, just kind of my name, kind of email address, LinkedIn. Also, what I will say about email address, and I've seen a lot of this when I've been a hiring manager, is interesting emails. And you can read between my lines when I say this. There's things like bossbabe@hotmail.com and other words that I cannot say out loud on this right now. And what I will say is just go onto Google or iCloud or whatever you want to do and just have your first name, second name at gmail.com is fine. So I just, because then I don't know, it just is a little bit, for me personally, I feel like it's a little bit unprofessional.
I mean, I think that's like a hangover of when people first started getting email addresses. So I think back to what my first Hotmail address was.
Yeah.
I definitely wouldn't be using that professionally.
Yeah, get yourself a professional email. And then in there as well, I do like a little bit of a, obviously like a little summary at the top. I now put key skills in there, so when it goes through
Okay.
is it called the ATS? Is that what
Yeah,
it's called?
applicant tracking system.
Yeah, so when it goes through there, I thought maybe there's some key skills in there it might pick up and be like, yes, 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 yes. Career history, bit like what Charlotte was saying as well. I've got in there as well just some of my kind of projects that I do. Those that know me well know that I do lots of projects. So we've got this LinkedIn Live, we've got my podcast in there, got that I'm co-authoring a book at the moment, just dropping that in there. And then kind of career history, education. The only thing I don't include is hobbies and interests. And it's really interesting because as of last week, I was against the idea of putting hobbies and interests in my CV until I read, because I was doing some research for this, I was reading online, I think it was in Forbes out of all places, I'll have to go and find it so I can properly link back to it, was saying about the interests can really strengthen your CV, especially, and they use the example of someone that's applying for maybe like a programming role in regards to like computer programming, that their hobbies and interests might be kind of, they do like to do gaming and do some kind of programming in the back, or build websites, the old school HTML coding, and I don't
Now
do
you're
that
showing
anymore.
your age.
I know, now I'm definitely showing my age. But I thought that was really interesting, and I thought I'd ask you, Charlotte, do you include hobbies and interests?
I don't have a section called hobbies and interests, but what I do have in my summary, and again, this comes back to what I've been saying about being a well rounded person, this being your value proposition. In my summary, my last sentence is basically, what I enjoy outside of work. So I mentioned, the things that I enjoy, like over sort of over a sentence or so.
Okay.
But I don't, as when I've been a hiring manager, it wouldn't put me off if somebody's put hobbies and interests. I think, as I said, you want to hire somebody who's a well-rounded person that, because, for example, if they play, I don't know, netball or football or a team sport, that probably gives you an indication that they're probably highly collaborative and they're a good team player.
Yeah.
So, there's subtle things like that. Or in the case of mine, I reference that, I'm I think I've put something around being a consumer of knowledge, i.e. means like I read a lot, I listen to lots of podcasts. Consumer of knowledge, I think is the phrase I use. And that shows that, I like to learn. I've got a high curiosity profile, and that, I'm probably, if I was given a piece of work where I need to do some discovery and research, that I would be good at doing that.
Yeah.
So, those are just some examples.
And I think that's really, and I wonder if, and it'd be great to hear from the rest of you as well, whether
Yeah,
that's made
absolutely.
you rethink about what you're going to put on your CV now. Because for me, I know I've got my projects on there, but I think I'm going to try and put something in there around other stuff that I get up to, and because like Charlotte, I read a lot as well. Might steal the line that you said and put in my
It's
CV.
trademarked. You can't do it. I'm only joking.
Damn it.
Um,
No, I think you're right. And another question that I had as well, and I think I'm going to know your answer to this. What's your view on having a photo on your CV?
Personally, I wouldn't do it, but that for me is because that just introduces another layer of bias.
Yeah.
So the thing that people are most worried about with CVs, job applications, is bias.
Mm.
And try as we might, as hiring managers, it's really hard to be completely unbiased. And by adding a photo, or identifying other features about yourself, such as your marital status, your gender, your pronouns, your race, your ethnicity, your religion. You're just giving more and more information that could, I'm not saying it would, but could potentially lead to bias. We want a balanced workforce. I think I've worked in lots of male dominated workforces. I've worked in a female dominated workforce, and the thing that I always come back to is you want a balanced workforce. So you don't want to introduce bias at the start, because lots of people are guilty of hiring in their own reflection, I would say. And I like you try really hard not to do that.
Yeah.
And so there are amazing tools out there now which allow you to do blind hiring. But
Yeah.
even if you put in information in your CV that it says that you have children, or that what your religion is, or that you indicate that you're a woman, or or a photo, those things can't be hidden on blind hiring. A blind hiring technology will essentially just change the name. So these are just things to think about. Now, look, that is, it's very common in the United Kingdom that you don't have a photo on your CV or your resume. However, in the US, and certainly in continental Europe, and that's when I think back to CVs I've had as a hiring manager, nearly all of them that have had a photo on them have either come from the continent of Europe or America.
Yeah, I
And so
agree.
I think it's a cultural thing, but certainly in the UK, I wouldn't advocate to do it.
Yeah. No, I agree to that as well. I also wanted to kind of add here as well, because I'm very aware that we're giving, if you're the person that kind of maybe similar to me does a lot of kind of tailoring both CV and cover letter depending on what you're applying for. I just wanted to shout out that nowadays there is use of things like AI that can
Yeah.
help you. And I know a couple of people who have felt a little bit stuck in a rut and have just used, like, say, ChatGPT. Try and say that quickly. Um, had to use that to help
Only
them.
coffee in there, Lucy.
I know, I promise you it's only coffee. um, and that can really help you, and I do encourage that as well. I think that, the tools are there, tools to help you, but also, people have been writing CVs for a very, 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 very long time. So, just a Google search as well, like an example of a marketing CV or an example of a project manager CV, and have a read through some of the examples as well. And my other last kind of bit that I'm adding on to this, I'm just kind of throwing it in the middle of our conversation here, just while I'm thinking about it, is I've also utilized some of the fantastic recruiters that I work with to read through my CV to give me some feedback. And I know, Charlotte, I think you've done the
Yeah.
same. And that is really, really helpful. And some of the feedback I've had, which is going to lead me more into a conversation about our CVs, is within the examples, the career history, I've used very outcome specific kind of bullet points of what I've done. I've tried to put some metrics in there as well. And especially me being a freelancer for the last 6 months, that's been really helpful. What's your view on that?
So there's a couple of things you said I'm just going to go
Loads.
back to. So
Apologies.
no, don't apologize. So regarding AI, I absolutely agree. I think it's a great tool to help. What I would say is make sure you don't just take what it says
Yeah.
at face value. It is computer generated. You should be personalizing what else it comes back with. You need to read through it to make sure it makes sense. So that would be just my,
Yeah. Completely agree.
be a bit careful with it. The other thing I was going to say that could help you if you're struggling with writing CV specifically is there are amazing CV writers out there. So people do this for a job. They will review your CV, they will rewrite. Some of them will just make recommendations, but you can pay for a company to write your CV. Again, this person does not know you personally, they're not you. So, they will give you a CV, but you may still have to make some edits to it to make it more you. I talked about this last week. It's about being uniquely you in terms of your career and your experience.
Yeah.
So those are kind of just a couple of add-ons to that. But yeah.
And what about having the outcome based bullet
Oh,
points?
yes. So for those of you who don't know, I mentor lots of particularly women in technology and digital. I am open to mentoring men too. And when we talk about CVs, or they show me their CV and they're like, oh, I need some advice. Can you help me? Nearly all the time, I might as well be reading a job description because there's no outcomes, or just a simpler way of describing it. There's no numbers. There's no like verbs. I was going to say doing words. Sorry, I've been spending time with young children. But there's no verbs. Like make sure you're starting your bullet points with a verb. The action you have taken, it's stronger. It'll help you to be more concise in your bullet point, but then leads to what your outcome is. Have you saved 20% off costs for XYZ? These things are powerful because they show the value of what you've delivered. So I absolutely agree with you on the outcomes based piece, but I think just to take that one step further, make sure you look at your bullet points on your CV and see whether they start with a verb.
Yeah, it's a great action to take away. I was taught this a long time ago by a fantastic mentor who looked at my CV and said exactly what you just said there. I feel like I'm reading a job spec. You need to show kind of just those outcomes, exactly what you've said there. So it's so nice that you've kind of
Yeah.
repeated back to me what somebody taught me a while ago.
I think lots of people are guilty of just writing a long description. And that doesn't really tell me anything. It just tells me what your job description is as a, like, when I'm looking at it as a hiring manager.
Yeah.
So, you know, make it punchy, make sure you've got lots of numbers in there. And yeah, you know, what you've done.
What if you don't have any numbers?
I I find that hard to believe that you wouldn't have numbers.
Mm,
So, you know, I would say you need to have a real think about what you've been doing, because ultimately, if you're not doing, so this just kind of a couple of ways of looking at it. So you're either driving growth in the business, or you are improving operational efficiency.
yeah.
Really, at a very base level, that those are the things you're doing. So you
Yeah.
need to think about how you've added value to a business. So it might be that I've delivered 5 out of 6 of the core changes that have allowed our business to remain profitable.
Yeah.
Like, super basic example, but there are numbers in there. I'm not saying that it has to be currency numbers. So, you know, with like revenue, profit,
Yeah.
EBITDA, you know, anything like that. But I mean, that is always helpful. And also, you might want to put percentages in rather than I saved X thousands of pounds of money, or dollars or euros, whatever your currency is.
Yeah.
So, but I would say that there's always a way to say, you know, to quantify your value.
Yeah. The reason why I asked that is because I just knew that some people might comment and say, "What if?" And we have obviously we've been doing our kind of careers for perhaps a little bit longer. We've got some
Yeah.
experience. We've worked in different industries and businesses, so we do have those kind of percentages and financials kind of within our CVs. But it's exactly, Charlotte, you said something there which I thought was really helpful. That if you've been part of a program and you've been there's 6 things that need to kind of improve the business, and you've worked on one of them or maybe 5 of them, put that in there, because yeah, I thought that was a really great example.
Yeah, I mean, you know, even to say I've managed X number of people, like, so, you know, because you're again quantifying the value. And don't get me wrong, I wouldn't expect every bullet point to have a number in, but that's where the strength comes from, starting a sentence with delivered, sponsored, led, you know, these very powerful words, designed, you know. I'm trying to think of more off the top of my head. Not enough coffee yet, apparently. So yeah. So I think those are things to think about.
Yeah, really great. So let's move over to cover letters, because I think we've covered a
Yeah,
lot.
we have.
Excuse that there. Covered a lot in CVs.
Don't get
Let,
about the day job,
oh, I
Lucy.
know. Sorry. Let's talk about cover letter.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, before we move
Oh
on, how
yes.
many pages do you CV?
Oh, 2. So I would say 2, max 3.
Same.
And the reason I say max 3 is because my CV, in terms of my experience and the other things that make me sort of rounded on my CV, is 2 pages. But then I have a third sneaky page, which is sample references from my LinkedIn recommendations that I have scraped and put onto another page. Because, you know, it's always good to get an idea of the person, what other people have said about them. And however, what I will say is some recruiters, if you go via a recruitment agency, might say, "Oh, I'm going to take out that last page because I, you know." But for me, I just think it's a good way to give people a snapshot without them then having to traipse through your LinkedIn, and, you know. So
Yeah.
I'm just trying to be helpful to the hiring manager, is the way I view
I
it.
love
But
that.
I would say like 2, max 3 pages.
Yeah.
I've received CVs before that are like 5 or 6 pages, and I'm
Yeah,
like,
same.
oh, I haven't got time to read all of this.
No.
Particularly, and as a hiring manager, I'm saying that. Imagine being somebody who works in the recruitment industry, where it's a volume game and you've got to go through and do a quick, yeah, no, you know. So
Yeah.
yeah, what do you think?
I know, completely agree. I think 2, maximum 3. I've received CVs that have been 6 pages long, and I have tried my hardest to make sure that I've gone through them all. But some of the kind of bits towards the end, it has been non-applicable, especially if it's been something that was like 20 years ago
Yeah,
and they
well,
were
I
doing a
guess
completely different role to what they're doing now
that's
and that
the
I
other
was
thing,
hiring
isn't it?
for. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Like,
So
I
much, isn't there?
I know. So I would say, like, don't go further back than 10 years on your CV.
Yeah.
I once had somebody's entire career history, and it was over 30 years. So you can imagine how long that CV was, because they'll have done a huge amount in that period of time. But the reality is probably 10 years or less, because that will be your most recent and relevant. However, what I do with jobs that fall outside of that is, and I think you might do this too, Lucy, but is I just have a bullet point of other notable employment, and
Yeah.
it's just got job title
Exactly.
for each of those things.
I will say one last thing about
Go on.
CVs before we move on to cover letters.
Mm-hmm.
I also, again, try to be great to get your view on this too. When I put my educational history on there, I just bullet point it because I've had so much experience now that my education, it's just so happens I've done a degree and I did A levels, and that I've seen people who are in the same level as me who have done everything. They did their
Yeah.
degree and then what they did their dissertation on and then all
Oh
the
my God,
results from
really?
everything. Do not put every single damn grade for everything you've ever
I
done,
think,
please.
well, if you're a graduate
If you're a
and you're
grad,
going
different
into your
story.
first job, I can totally
Yeah,
understand why you'd put
agreed.
that. But as somebody who's been, working for a while, so I have a section called Education and Professional Qualifications, and I just have the name of my degree, the classification, and where I went to university, and then underneath I've got like all the other professional qualifications. I've got like my CIPD, org design and development certification, my Prince 2, Scrum Master, soon to have my ITIL 4, other things. And I just have a section of that. I don't have dates next to them. I just have a list of them. Again, it comes back to the whole ATS thing about what's going to be picked up.
Yeah.
But if a hiring manager really wants to know the detail behind any of those things, and I have actually once been asked in an interview what my dissertation was on, and this was somewhere in the middle of my career, and it was, I think, what my dissertation was on, what I learned from it. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I can't even remember. Well, I can remember. I know
Yeah.
what my dissertation was on and
Yeah.
I know what the key points were. But that really threw me. But it's very rare for people to ask, because certainly from my point of view as a hiring manager, I'm looking at your experience and what experience you can apply to the role you have. I think it's quite old fashioned for somebody to be so laser focused on the education.
It just
I don't know
raised
what you think.
Yeah, agreed. And you've just raised a point there, which we are going to cover later on, kind of in our kind of 6 weeks of this, is around interviews.
Oh,
And
yes.
what I will leave you with, and I will come back to, is last year I had someone quiz me on my degree, which is for me, feels like a long time ago. And they were asking me questions about my degree. I did a degree in computing, and I think they thought I was going to be a lot more technical than I actually am. So I'll leave that kind of nugget there with you, and I can tell you how I handled it and what we went through with it. Anyway, let's talk about cover letters. Right, go for it. I don't even know where to start. We've covered so much of CVs. I'm like, what do we need to talk about now? Cover letters.
Well, we've touched on cover letters already, right? So in terms of them being, I see a cover letter as a value add. So it's that extra bit of detail that really tailors and draws in what you've done to showcase the requirements of the job description. It's also a great opportunity to show your enthusiasm for the company and the role, and what your motivations are for applying for that job. And also it shows that you've done a little bit of research already. So I think it's really important, when you're writing your cover letter, that you at least have one paragraph in there that shows that you understand the business that you're applying for, and why that you're excited. It might be because they've got a really strong sustainability profile, and that's something that you're really passionate about, and how it aligns to your how the role might align to your personal aspirations. I think that's a really it's for a hiring manager to read that and like, oh, okay, yeah, so they get us, and then go into kind of demonstrating how you meet the requirements. What I would also say is it doesn't need to be that long. In some places now I've seen cap it and say 500 words. Actually, 500 words, you can write a lot in 500 words. And Yeah. So one page max. Do not write War and Peace. Nobody wants a 6-page CV plus a 6-page cover letter.
Yeah.
As accomplished as you are, I don't think that would add value. That would probably not even see the light of day.
Yeah, really align with what you're saying around adding value. And I also would say as well that although I know that Charlotte and I have said that we tailor our cover letter for each application, I would also say that doesn't mean that we're starting from scratch each time. I have a
No.
template that I build upon, or there might be something that I'd applied for, and actually I wanted to use some of the examples I'd used in that, but then I tweak it. But I also use it as an example to kind of show off that I know a bit about their company, why I think I'd be a great fit, what I like about their culture. I also try and have a look at some of their value words. So maybe they've got some values. Every company has values, but you know what I mean by that. Like, what's their mission statement? I try and maybe feed that into my cover letter as well. Again, exactly what Charlotte's saying around showing that, one, that you're keen to work for that company, and these are the reasons why. But also just to kind of, boost someone's kind of, oh, he, they know this. Oh, great, la la la. They know what they want to apply for. And I think that can really strengthen, a bit like what that example Charlotte gave earlier, it can really kind of strengthen your CV and who you are.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Going back to the poll around optional cover letters, I'm not sure I got what your view was on that, Lucy. Do you, if it's optional, would you put a cover letter in, or do you not?
I do.
Okay.
I think no. I I think it would depend. I think it would depend on what I'm applying for. So say if I was applying for, again, people that know me know that I've been doing, I've mentioned this 3 times now, so please forgive me.
You're
I'm
consistent, if anything.
Thank you. I've been freelancing the last kind of 6 months. So if I was applying for a service transition role, and it was for a contract, I probably would just submit my CV. But if I was applying for a contract role that was perhaps more outside of kind of service
Mm-hmm.
design, service transition, service delivery management, and it was more like change, I probably would then submit a cover letter with it, because I know I could deliver a change program as well as, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so you've touched on a really interesting point, which is contract versus permanent.
Yeah.
Do you, and I don't think we didn't talk about this, so
Mm.
you might have to sort of answer this a bit freestyle, but
Yeah.
do you write your CV and your cover letter differently for your contract type roles to how you wrote permanent? If so, why? Tell everybody.
My contracting CV is a little bit more snappier.
Okay.
A little bit, there's a lot more outcome-based stuff on there, and I don't talk about the extra stuff that I have done within organizations. So when I was in my previous permanent job, I was part of the leadership team for a women's network, and I did a lot of work in that space. Felt like I gave a lot of value in that space as well.
Mm-hmm.
In the permanent CV, I talk more about that, because if I go and work in a permanent role, I'd want to go and be involved in those community networks.
Yeah.
Whereas with a contract role, I would talk more just about the job and what I've done and what I've delivered, because you're paying somebody like myself a day rate to come in, do a job, and get stuff done. As a contractor, I wouldn't really get involved in those lovely community groups that a company might have. But then different again, it would be for a permanent role.
So that's really interesting. I've never been a contractor. I have done a fixed term contract. So for anybody that doesn't know, a fixed term contract, you're salaried. So you're treated like a permanent employee. It's usually because you're providing like maternity leave cover.
Mm-hmm.
Or the company doesn't want to go down the whole inside outside IR35 shenanigans. And so I would say for me, with the fixed term contract roles, because you're treated like a permanent employee, I would still have a permanent, use the same CV approach. But I totally understand, and it makes sense why yours is lighter on, the broader, well-rounded stuff on your
Yeah.
contract CV.
And the contract stuff that I've been doing is outside IR35. Even if it was inside, I would still probably do the same. it's more to do with the fact that it's for shorter periods of time. So when you
Yeah.
do an FTC, fixed term contract, like Charlotte was saying there, for like a mat cover, that can be 9 months to a year, whereas some of the work that I've been doing has been 2 months, 3 months, and it's been very project based. So it's been come in, do a project, leave, come in, do a project, leave. And that's, interestingly though, what I will say, and again, I think we'll talk about this later on through
Mhm.
this, I was going to get through this program, my work that I've had with the contracting I've been doing, I haven't necessarily had to submit a CV because it's been all through people
Yeah.
who've known me through LinkedIn, which is our subject next week.
Yes, absolutely. So I don't think I have anything else on cover letters or CVs. We have covered a lot. Haha, I'm using your pun. So Lucy, tell us, what are we talking about next week?
So next week we're going to be talking all things LinkedIn. So our LinkedIn profiles, we want to be talking about creator mode, our banners, our photo on there, headline, just the lot. And it's just from the experience that Charlotte and I have had over the last few years building out our LinkedIn profiles, writing articles as well. And we wanted just to share this experience with you and how it can benefit you as well.
Great. Well, we would love to hear from you guys, and hopefully you found this episode super helpful. Please pop some comments in. We're going to share the resources that we mentioned too, and we look forward to catching up with you guys next week for another episode of Careers and Coffee.